Welcome, everybody, to Not So Famous Achievers. Weekly conversations with some of the world's most amazing but not so famous achievers on what they did and how they did it and what you can learn from their journey. With your hosts, Will Christ and Robert White. Hey, guys.
Well, welcome to Conversations with the Not So Famous Achievers, and welcome today, Brian Sallee. Brian, coming all the way from Tampa, Florida.
Hello. It's a pleasure being here today. Great to connect.
So tell us, Brian, you talk about how you are helping companies disrupt industries. So talk about what that means.
Disrupt is doing something that's slightly different. One of my friends describes me as a bit of a guy when there's a hole in the roof. Everybody else is looking on top of the roof for how the leak is happening in the roof. And I'm the guy that's like climbing into the attic and looking up through the ceiling to see where the light comes through. Uh-huh. So to me, disruption, obviously from an ethical and positive sense, is doing something just slightly different enough to make waves and make a ripple effect that has a positive and often an exponential impact.
Well, that's pretty exciting to think in terms of incremental growth and disruption. How did you get into this kind of thinking?
Great question. I think it goes all the way back to my map. So we were just chatting about my map behind me. So I was actually born and raised in a third world country. I was born and raised in Haiti. And my mom originally did medical missions, and I grew up there. And I think it really shaped me as a person because I grew up without electricity. So I didn't have electricity. I didn't have running water. In fact, we moved around quite a bit. I've been to over 30 countries by the time I got out of college. And by the time I had access to the internet, I was probably wired a little differently, and what makes me a little bit weird and disruptive. And so even on my friends today, people mention TV shows and things like, oh, did you have this growing up? I'm like, no, I didn't. I was playing with tarantulas and, figuring out how to push things around the yard, I guess, without power. So that's how I got into it. And through a series of events, I think I really cut my teeth on a business that I started back in 2007. And looking back, I actually started one of my businesses during the recession of 2008. And I didn't realize how hard it was until after I'd gone through it. But that's one of the things that really shaped me. I got a bit of an achievement out of it, but candidly, I made a lot of mistakes. And that's one thing that I carry forward to what I do today.
All right. So here you are in the world of basically technology, right?
Yes.
So where do you see technology going in the next 5 to 10 years?
In the next 5 to 10 years? So there's two answers. And the first one is the sexy, interesting one is I think we're looking at cryptocurrency. A lot of projects I'm involved with are crypto, NFT, augmented reality, virtual reality, Oculus, very cool innovation around the metaverse and Web 3.0. All those fun buzzwords. The second answer I'll give is it's also fascinating to me how technology repeats itself. And I see these trends where, yes, there's a new cutting edge technology, but it could often be harnessed the same way that it was used in the 80s, the 90s, the early 2000s.
Like?
Repeat themselves, right? So the computer was personal, or it was personal, and then I went to mainframes and went to large computing instances, and then the 90s it went back to Windows 95, and the computer is personal again. And then my last business that I started and sold was a cloud computing company, which was ultimately 80s technology. But I made seven figures in mid 2000s from the same approach.
So when you help companies to innovate, what kinds of things do they need to know to be innovative in their world? Is it something they bring? Is it something you inspire in them? Is it a planning process? What brings about the innovation?
Sure. Well, the way that I look at businesses is you've got four main quadrants that compose a business. You've got marketing, you've got sales, you've got operations, and finance. By the way, I don't mean to leave out people. People is phenomenally important if you put that as a fifth area. But in terms of the core operations, I like to think of people embedded in all four of those. Uh-huh. And what I've found through my life lessons is that if you are trying to move something heavy, you might be able to physically move an object that's pretty heavy just by pushing on, right? If you get a lever, if you get a stick or a lever or something, you can actually push that object and you can move something that's a lot heavier than you are. Well, there's a secret factor with levers that we all know, by the way, which is a fulcrum. I remember when I got my lawnmower stuck in the yard a couple of years ago, which is, I've got I don't have a big lawnmower, but it's probably 1,000 pounds, right? 500 pounds. I can't lift it. And my kids and wife were all looking at me like, how are you going to lift it? And what I did is I got a 2x4 and I got a fulcrum and I was able to step on it. In fact, my 3-year-old could step on that lever and lift up the mower out of the mud, right? So if you look at marketing, operations, sales, and finance, to me, thinking disruptively is what is one thing that you can do in each quadrant where you can do something that's not being done today. You can apply the 80-20 rule. You can stand against the grain. You can do something that all of your competition isn't doing that would have a massive and exponential effect on that portion of your business. And that's a process that I love thinking through is if you do that one time in marketing and you only get 100% improvement, and you do that one time in sales and 100%, and you do something in operations, you do something in finance, the result is you've got more people standing in line for your product or service. It sells faster. It can be delivered more profitably, and you can scale it quicker. It's basically impossible for your business not to grow at that point in time.
So the trick is finding one thing in each of those four quadrants that you can 100x, huh? Make it better?
Exactly. And when I say 100% improvement, I mean, you can consider that 2x or more, right? So I know people like to talk about 10x or 20x, but in my mind, I say keep it reasonable. Just double it, right? Just double the number of leads you get. Just double the profitability. Just double your output for the day. If you just do that in all four areas, as long as you've got a good company and a good team and good people, it can really make a difference for your business.
Right. So what are you excited about in the next 6 to 9 months?
I am really excited about the metaverse. I'm really excited about this virtual reality world that's being created because it's a new blend of productivity and things that a lot of us are now a lot more comfortable with, like working from home in the past year. And it's a new way to harness technology. Now, virtual reality and glasses, I mean, I'm sure we all can give examples. It's been around for years in a way, right? People have been trying to do it for maybe even up to 10 years. But as of this year, there's really been an inflection point where Facebook, which is now Meta, and some really big companies like Magic Leap and others have really pushed the needle on the hardware to where it's actually usable. So personally, that's one thing that I'm really watching for is this new world that's being created, which is ultimately virtual reality.
Well, I was reading a story just the other day in Wired magazine, and it said, that virtual reality is something we've been promised again and again and again. He said Oculus was this huge, exciting possibility. And yes, he says there have been some improvements in the goggles, improvements but he said, we haven't seen anything that we're really promised. What do you think is getting in the way?
I think there is an inflection point of hardware catching up to the need and the demand. I see a lot of businesses that started at the wrong time, and then somebody started that exact same business later, and it worked. I'll give you a quick example. I remember going to London probably 8 or 9 years ago and seeing what we now know, candidly, as Instacart, right? As a food delivery.
Right.
And everybody seemingly in England was using it, 7, 8, 9 years ago. I came back. I said, this is phenomenal. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm going to start a food delivery company. And I looked, and I couldn't tell you the name of it, but it may have even been affiliated with Amazon possibly, but it's public record. There's a company that tried it that same year, and I think they spent almost $1 billion, $800 million, and failed miserably. Guess what? Last year, pandemic hits. Everybody's thinking differently. My wife and I, we signed up for food delivery. A lot of our friends signed up for food delivery. And, here we are 7 years later where the tech has now met up with the need. And to go back to your question, I think that we're seeing the same thing, is now the need of working remote and working with teams has caught up and maybe is intersecting with the hardware as well as the backbone of the internet.
Interesting. Well, I was really pleased to see that we are taking seriously this last mile for the internet for people all around the country. It's almost like, you talk about growing up without electricity. People grew up without telephones, and it was only the privileged few that could use telephones. And likewise, we have these hollow spaces around the country where internet's really very, very sketchy. Yes. And so I was really pleased to see that we're going to bring all these folks online, in addition to creating jobs for people who are putting in that, the internet infrastructure around the country.
Absolutely.
I think that's going to make a big difference.
I think it will too. So actually, I'm involved pretty heavily in a project right now that's supporting that. And one thing about that low Earth orbit satellite is it's fantastic, by the way, right? Starlink, and there's a number of mainstream vendors that are involved in various projects. Satellites are still relatively lossy because you're still communicating over a long distance. And so there's a company that I'm involved with here in Tampa that has figured out how to accelerate internet for low bandwidth situations like that. Wow. And so we've actually packaged that up in a product called Red Velvet. We did a little Indiegogo campaign a couple months ago. And Red Velvet's a box that can plug and actually make that more usable. And it's been really fun. We talk about, some achievements is we actually just had a couple of those boxes land in Africa last week, because that's a big need in third world countries, is being able to make internet more usable. But it's also a product that makes a big difference here in America across the rural Midwest and mountains.
Well, my wife and I have done a lot of work in the villages in Alaska, in the interior of Alaska. And one of the things, we did that for 13 years. And so back in the beginning, 10 years ago, 12 years ago, one of the things that I wanted to do was help them get internet connection, and which we did through HughesNet.
Sure.
Nevertheless, it was very slow. Very slow. So sure. Is that something that Red Velvet could help with?
It can. It depends on the actual use case, but it can make a huge difference, like 100% improvement or more. So 2x or more simply by optimizing the satellite link.
So is that something that's independent of the provider?
It is. Yeah, so we've actually shrunk it down and talked about, innovation with technology. I don't know that it would have been possible years ago, but we actually have it running on a 6-inch box that you plug one cable into the satellite and one cable into your local network, and it will automatically optimize and make that 2 times faster or more.
Is that available now?
It's available right now. Absolutely.
Where do we find it?
Redvelvet.systems. www.redvelvet.systems.
Redvelvet.systems. Maybe we can get some for the villages up there. My wife is working with online training for them. and one of the issues is that internet is choppy and slow. So that would be interesting.
I would love that. It's a bit of a passion project to me because it's a really, I love seeing technology make an impact on lives. And I realize that sounds a little bit cliche, but I get less joy, if you will, from helping a $500 million business make an extra $50 million than I do, like what we're talking about today, is harnessing, very cutting edge technology, but make it usable to where kids can actually learn. An orphanage can actually get on the internet and do what they need to be able to do. And that's really fun to see that gap bridge via technology and business.
Well, redvelvetsystems.com does not bring up a site.
Just redvelvet.systems. www.
All right. Well, all right. Let's see. Redvelvet.system. Systems, plural?
Systems, plural. Yes, sir.
All right. Here we are. Satellite Internet Acceleration. Order now. Wow. $800. Very interesting. Very interesting. Well, I am going to take a look at that, see what we can do.
And we can talk offline too. We'll get one or more for the villages in Alaska. We're trying to bring the cost down as much as we can. Just for comparison, what this technology does before, I don't want to speak out of turn, but from what I know, is typically about a $40,000 box, right? Meaning if you were going to, in years past, right? In years past, if you were going to put this on a cargo ship at sea, you would need to spend a ton of money, right? It's just not something that was something you could send to a third world country.
Right.
So we brought the cost down, obviously, massively, and we think we can bring it down even more. More people that support it,
Well, I think that's really a critical thing, at least where my wife is. We're both priests in the Episcopal Church, and she is working with presiding bishop staff for the Episcopal Church, and her task is she is the coordinator for theological education for indigenous people in the church, and so a lot of her work is with people in these dark places of the internet. And so this might be something very helpful for them, and particularly right now in Alaska, where she is, they're delivering online training to folks. And the problem is not just delivering the training, because that could be done with a DVD or just downloading it overnight, but for live meetings like what we're having right now, that's where it gets very sketchy and difficult.
Absolutely.
So does this also make it more robust and more dependable?
It's not going to alter what's there. So I do want to be full disclosure. I mean, there has to be a good satellite with good line of sight. I would say that it alters the usability, meaning that one could get quite frustrated simply logging into a website without optimized internet.
Right.
And so this changes the effective utilization of that satellite link massively, like by 100% or more.
Excellent. Well, that's a fun thing. We can certainly talk about that. So all of these pieces that are aiming at helping us to I don't think it's shrinking the world. I think it's allowing us to be more deeply involved with the world. I mean, I don't feel like the distance between Tampa and Laguna Beach has gotten shorter because of Zoom. But I do believe that is allowing us to have this kind of conversation at a very high quality, not touch, but certainly a high quality of involvement in conversation. And so to me, it makes the world a deeper place, a more meaningful place.
I agree. I think you're 100% right. It's making a big difference from that perspective.
Well, growing up in a third world country, right? For you, what would you say your venue is? Is it just the United States now, or do you have a global set, a global network that you work with? Where are you in terms of that kind of expansion?
That's a really good question. I mean, certainly I would probably think of it as a ripple effect in a pond. I mean, there's no doubt that I'm the most involved here in Tampa.
Uh-huh.
This is where my family is. I've been here for quite a while now. And so a lot of the entrepreneurs and leaders that I work with are here. From there, I'm involved in a variety of things that are nationwide clients, and I'll jump on an airplane or do video calls like this. And then international, I'm not traveling internationally right now. I don't know that a lot of us are, at least in the past couple of years. Even though I love traveling internationally, I have a lot in the past. So I've got a lesser involvement overseas, but even something like Red Velvet, being able to send a couple units to Africa within the past 2 weeks is something that's really tangibly making a difference in other countries right now. So,
well, I just find that it's so interesting that for instance, using LinkedIn to search for people that I'd like to talk to,
sure.
and then coming up with somebody from India and having a great conversation with India and realizing that this particular person I was talking with has a great network in India that he wants to introduce me to.
Sure.
And then also being part of a group that started in England, but has people all around the world that are really attempting to create a network of 100 people who are very much involved with each other. Now, that to me is a whole deepening thing that I haven't seen before. Now, certainly have seen lots of companies using the resources of India or the Philippines to get jobs done cheaper.
Sure.
But I'm not aware of networks for people like you and me just to build deeper relationships with people without having any particular thing to do. Have you seen many of those?
That's your next business idea. Well, we'll combine satellite and virtual reality and meaningful relationships.
Yeah.
No, that's a great point. I don't know that there is one authority. I mean, certainly LinkedIn has really changed the world from that perspective.
Yes.
I've been able to, like you, come across some just absolutely brilliant, well-connected people overseas, even within the past couple months, to build into them, encourage them, share ideas. And I think LinkedIn has been a pretty interesting conversation platform. Absolutely. I don't know that there is an authority to your point, but LinkedIn and Zoom are and probably Facebook or Meta now is pretty impactful as well, right?
And I think we're kind of stumbling into this. I mean, the COVID constraints certainly forced us to take responsibility in a whole different way. If when the check stopped from the companies that had closed, if people didn't take responsibility for themselves and go do something to bring in the money for the rent and for the food on the table, they weren't going to survive. and likewise, in doing that, not being able to leave the house, but needing to communicate, I think we're stumbling into new possibilities. It's almost like taking walls down in a house and not really realizing that we have that extra space there yet, but we're beginning to kind of tentatively walk into it, because really the conversations like we're having right now, there's no reason we can't have these kind of conversations around the world.
There are two kinds of entrepreneurs, those who run their business and those whose business runs them. If you've lost control of your business, consider running on EOS, the Entrepreneurial Operating System. EOS is used by more than 100,000 companies to clarify, simplify, and achieve their vision. Stop letting your business run you and start running your business. Schedule a free 90-minute meeting with an EOS implementer at eosworldwide.com. That's eosworldwide.com.
Well, we're going to give you one quick thought here that plays into what we've been talking about here today. Our two hosts have lived extraordinary lives and been extraordinary entrepreneurs, and Robert White, certainly one of them. He mentors extraordinary entrepreneurs and executives just like you, people who want better results from their leadership performance. He shows them how to turn those results into increased personal joy and satisfaction as well. Robert founded and led two large training industry success stories. He's been there and done that, and his experience will help you find and achieve that extraordinary success you seek in your life. So why wait? Reach out and see what Robert can do for you today. Just email him at robert@extraordinarypeople.com, robert@extraordinarypeople.com, and start living the extraordinary life you've earned. And now back to our show.
So we were talking about this kind of global possibility that is not just an intellectual thing anymore. It's sort of like learning how to use a telephone and then learning how to use a cell phone. We can literally have this quality conversation with anybody in the world.
Absolutely, and that's one reason why I'm excited about the virtual reality, metaverse, if you will, Web 3.0, is that this is fantastic, by the way, right? But it's interesting to think of what this would look like even a year from now if everybody, even tuning in, had those glasses and could all be around a table together. And could we have this level of video quality, but in 3 dimensions? And that's kind of where I'm excited to see where things tend to go for, because at that point, it doesn't matter if we're 1 mile away from each other or 1,000 miles away, that quality interaction just gets better and better and better.
Yeah. It's amazing, just amazing. And I don't think we've even begun to see the extent to which our conversations can be expanded globally, and then our relationships are deepened. On a scale of 100, I think we're about 20% right now.
Absolutely.
We talked about sending a couple of boxes, red velvet boxes, to Africa. I know about your background, so I know that you've got a heart for helping folks. So what are kind of projects that you've been involved with?
From a business standpoint, or nonprofit, or all the above?
Nonprofit, places where you've seen needs and that you are working to solve some of the problems, meet some of the needs.
Sure. I mean, the satellite one is certainly one right now. From the nonprofit and global perspective, is getting enough bandwidth and getting enough internet to people that really need it. I've got a variety of clients as well as projects I'm personally involved with where people are really trying to make a tangible difference in a specific area. Maybe in medical, some component of medical, or using technology to create better outcomes for patients, or helping to lower the cost of healthcare. I've got some clients trying to tackle augmented reality. So augmented reality is overlaying data on top of real life, which is different, right? It's a different use case. It's more applicable for a fighter jet pilot or a car, whereas virtual reality is, let's have a meeting or solve something. There's a variety of projects where people are taking virtual reality to the medical field, being able to do training. So if you can imagine being able to teach an operating procedure where maybe you're an esteemed doctor on something that is highly, highly practical. I'm a student. I could be on the other side of the world. And if we could combine technology and encryption and compression and glasses or whatever it is, I could learn that procedure from you as if I was right there doing that specific medical procedure. So, some things I can talk more freely about, some things I can't. But I love what I do because I feel like I talk to a wide and diverse idea set of entrepreneurs, even on a daily and weekly basis.
So what do you think what is it that drives entrepreneurs in your experience?
The first thing that comes to mind is not wanting to have a job. I think a lot of entrepreneurs, hate the idea of working for somebody else 8 hours per day and would rather work for themselves, even if it means half the wages and working 20 hours a day, right? I think that's how the joke goes. You work a whole lot more hours and sometimes you make a whole lot less money. But I think maybe more on a practical and serious note, it's around solving a problem. It's getting out there and really seeing a need that you're passionate about and getting behind it. And one thing that I love chatting with early stage entrepreneurs about is you can make money doing anything. You really can. And I think that applies not just with the profit side, but also the nonprofit making a difference is if you are passionate about something, get laser focused on it, clarify that there's even a small subset of people that need that solution, profit or nonprofit, and specialize in that specific buyer persona. And I talk a lot about laser focus with people is there's really three things, right? There's your buyer persona, who's going to stand in line for your entrepreneurial idea. The second one is your messaging, is don't change your messaging. I run a marketing growth agency as well. And, I tell people I can save them tons of money per year simply by that concept of don't change what you're doing too often. If you figure out how to articulate what your business does, what you stand for, and how you do it, I'll save you a ton of money in consulting. Just don't change it, right? Stay constant with it. And the third one is laser focusing and getting very specific around the product or service. And that's one thing when we talk about achievements. I mean, one thing that I achieved with one business that I sold was a complete accident because I was trying to do too many things at once. And I ended up narrowing down my focus with some advice from some very wise people, and ultimately ended up with a very specialized business with a product that 99% of people had never heard of before. Right. But there was a huge revenue opportunity around that product. And I love to try to encourage other entrepreneurs to simply think the same way.
So do you think everybody or anybody could become an entrepreneur?
I do believe so. I do believe so. I've read statistics, and I'll say this with a smile on my face, that there's really only about 5% of Americans that are crazy like me.
Yes.
Probably only 5% of people that have an irresistible passion to not fail, if you will, and just constantly innovate. So I think there is the weirdos, maybe I'm one of those weirdos, but I think anybody can become an entrepreneur. Anybody can make money doing anything simply by harnessing what they're passionate about, what they're good at, and staying focused on it. And I meet people every single week who maybe they're not as weird as I am, but they still have figured out how to make 4, 5, 6, 7 figures a year simply by being an entrepreneur and sticking with sharing a product or service that they're really good at and that there's a big need for.
What was coming to my mind was that there are a number of people who are resigning their jobs right now. You're aware of that, right?
There are
some numbers as big as
just in August.
Yeah,
I think.
Yeah, 20, 30, 40, 50%, different statistics, but lots of people are just saying, I'm through.
Right.
What do you make of that?
Well, I think it's going to create a lot of entrepreneurs. I think it's going to potentially add a lot more people into the entrepreneurial workforce that are coming out of the big corporate America. from my vantage point, what I see is it's already affecting the large corporations. As the large corporations are seeing that attrition and seeing people leave, but you've got businesses popping up at a amazing and exciting rate for me. I love seeing it.
Yeah. Do you think that's going to change the way that companies attract or attempt to attract or recruit, and maintain and motivate their people?
I definitely do. There's even some statistics coming out that the impact of COVID on employees in the workforce has drastically changed people to assess how passionate they are about the mission of the company. Uh-huh. And I may be off a few points on my statistics, so forgive me, but they're something to the effect of management in a big company. 85% of senior leadership are passionate about the purpose of why the company exists. Uh-huh. But at the front line of a big company, maybe only 15 to 18% of the employees and the frontline staff are even passionate about what the company is there for and what they exist to do. And that's what we're seeing with COVID is some of those big Fortune 100, Fortune 1000, Global 1000 businesses that they're having to take a very serious look about who their high performers are, how do they retain their performers via incentives, via, quite frankly, passion. Why do we exist, and why should you stay here making a difference? Because of exactly the reason we're talking about today is you can leave the workforce and go start your own business that you're 100% passionate about.
Employee shortage is not just for the Fortune 1000. I've got many clients in a 10 to 250 employee range who are suffering with the same struggle with people aren't coming back to work here. Now, one of the things that I wonder is, are you familiar with the EOS, the Entrepreneurial Operating System?
I am. Yeah.
Okay.
Great platform. All
right. So a lot of the conversation, I'm a implementer for EOS. So a lot of the training has to do with how a great company works. That's what the book Traction is about. It's about how to make this work. And recently, Gino just published a book called The EOS Life. And what I think is this is the why. And I wonder if when companies use this and implement the EOS Life as part of their reason for being, that it might change the way that they can attract people. Now, EOS Life is 5 things. It's only doing what you love doing, and I'll bet that's something you do all the time, right?
Absolutely.
All right, only do what I love doing. I am doing it with people that I love. I'm making a great contribution, not only to myself and to my company, but to the world. I'm doing something significant. I'm getting compensated appropriately, and I have plenty of time left over for my other passions. Now, you and I can see how valuable that is. When a company says, 10 years from now, we're going to have $150 million or $50 million in revenue, my question to them is how, that might be really motivating for you, but when you think down to the button pushers and the nail drivers and the wrench turners, how motivating is that for them? And people realize it's not motivating to them at all.
Exactly.
But what if you said one of the reasons for this business to be here and one of the reasons for you to work with us is by that 10 years, 100% of the people in this company will be living this EOS life or have a clear path toward it. Do you think that would make a difference?
I do think it would make a difference. I found this. I found the quote for it's Gallup, by the way, that mentioned that nearly 2/3 of U.S.-based employees said that COVID-19 has caused them to reflect on their purpose in life. Uh-huh. And McKinsey says that meaning and passion, exactly what you're just referencing, according to McKinsey, that has a impact on work and life that's 5 times more powerful than any other dimension. So I agree with you 100%.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's my hobby horse is getting companies to believe that and to learn how to implement that for the entire workforce. And you know, we predict we'll be EOS will be being used in over 100,000 companies by 2030. And so if we can also, in the process of teaching them how to use this system, we can also inspire them to commit to getting every employee into that path of leading the EOS life. I think that, you know, just 100,000, you assume that, 50 people was the average number of employees. That's 5 million people, not counting their families, that are going to be impacted in the next 9 years.
Absolutely. That's incredible.
I think that's going to make a huge impact and change.
Absolutely.
And if we can do it with virtual reality, that'll make it even more exciting.
Exactly.
Super. Well, this has been a great fun, Brian. I'm so glad to have met you and have the conversation. And let's stick around and see what we can do with some of the villages in Alaska with red velvet, huh?
We should. Let's get them a box, and we'll circle back in a couple months and see how it made a difference on what they do.
Good. If somebody wanted to get in touch with you, how would they do that?
So my platform is modernscale.co, and I'm on social media. If you look for me, the best place to go is brians360.com, BRIAN, the letter S, 360.com. And my Twitter profiles and email and everything is available there for anyone that's referenced. Modernscale.co has a variety of resources. Even this week and next week, I'm updating the site. So there's a couple of paid things, but I'm putting some more free resources on there as well. And then even some of the things we talked about today too, we put up a bunch of resources on odigo.academy. Odigo stands for leadership in Greek, and it's just www.odigo.academy for anybody who's looking at retaining employees, getting into the entrepreneurial side. If you want to know what the best are doing, there's some great resources there too. So
good. All right. Well, this has been wonderful, Brian.
Thank you for having me. It's been a blast.
Well, and what Robert and I are both finding is that there are so many great conversations to be had with people who are not so famous yet.
Well, there you have it. Another great example of why you got to tune in. Overhear some conversations with maybe some not so famous but real achievers like our guest today. Right here in Orange County's only community radio station, octalkradio.net. Streaming live from our studios here at the University of California, Irvine's Beale Applied Innovation Center.